In the previous chapter, after exchanging his points for upgrade materials, Zukian upgraded his beast to a 6-star ordinary rank. Additionally, he unlocked a new companion skill called Night Fight, which piqued his interest and made him consider heading to the training palace to practice it. However, before doing so, he decided to visit the university's battle hall first, in which he encountered Lu Liang and a new guy named Zheng Hao who was a battle maniac. But since Zukian doesn't want peace and just wants problem always, he accepted to fight this guy, and the battle was evenly matched until Zheng Hao's fire elf decided to take to the skies, attacking Doggo from a distance, and this quickly irritated Doggo, prompting him to use his avalanche skill in an attempt to secure a victory. Luckily, a teacher intervened, bringing the battle to an abrupt end. But with this fight, the two realized that their current power wasn't enough, and therefore, they headed straight to the training palace to hone their skills further, now challenging the hard difficulty trial. Now on to the next part. Upon entering the simulation, they were greeted by an endless darkness, almost as if they were standing in the middle of a snowfield on a pitch-black night. Within that darkness, several glowing eyes stared back at them, making Zukian's blood boil with excitement. But as they drew closer, they finally saw what they were up against, and things weren't looking great on their side, as these frost tyrannosauruses were no joke, with an average level of 9 stars in the ordinary rank. So naturally, their excitement quickly turned to caution as they realized they had truly effed up. But they're fighters, not cowards. So even with the terrifying sight of those dinosaurs baring their teeth, ready to maw at them, they decided to go all out and welcome these mofos with open arms. When Doggo got close, Zukian activated the night battle skill, greatly enhancing Doggo's battle power. This boost allowed him to easily reach his desired destination and make his avalanche skill as effective as possible, wiping out a good number of enemies in one fell swoop. Meanwhile, back in the real world, the worker had finally decided it was time to report to the owner unlike before. Hoping to score some credits, he informed the owner that Zukian was now challenging the hard difficulty, which shocked the owner enough to make him head to the training palace to see it for himself. Unexpectedly, Zukian returned from the simulation much faster than anyone anticipated. But it wasn't because he was victorious. Nope, they were heavily overwhelmed by the monsters. And they admitted that, while the experience gained from fighting these high-level opponents was manageable, but the extra difficulty made the spawn rate rapid, leaving no room for rest. And although Doggo had been upgraded to 7 stars, the 9-star ice dino that appeared had such thick skin and flesh that it was nearly impossible for them to defeat. But even with this loss, the worker was left speechless, utterly impressed by their performance. Despite the overwhelming odds, they had still managed to kill more than a dozen of those ice dinosaurs, leaving only 188 survivors from their encounter. And as Zukian and Doggo took a much-needed rest inside the facility, Zukian noticed a new system task displayed on his phone. Upon closer inspection, he saw that the quest required him to upgrade his beast to 9 stars in order to unlock the Snow Toad's exclusive binding skill named Turning Stone into Gold. This Midas-like ability could strengthen the treasures found by the Snow Toad, leading Zukian to assume that his toad might soon make a comeback. The pressing question now, however, was how he could quickly upgrade Doggo to 9 stars. But Zukian's train of thought was abruptly disrupted when someone entered the room. To his surprise, it was none other than the owner himself. With this, Zukian immediately asked why the owner was there of all places, to which the owner explained his reason and then casually inquired how many monsters Zukian had managed to kill, which Zukian embarrassingly admitted that he had only taken down a little more than a dozen, as it is still too much effort for a 7 stars to beat a 9-star monster. But just then, Zukian recalled that the owner had promised him some evolution materials. Maybe, just maybe, he could upgrade Doggo to 9 stars after all. So while the owner was still puzzled by why on earth a 7-star beast would attempt a trial that even low-level elites struggle to complete, Zukian took the opportunity to ask about those materials. And the owner's surprise was evident, because if Zukian chose to use the materials for upgrading, he'd have to figure out how to evolve his beast on his own. But that was fine by Zukian, which the owner fully understood. And not only he sees the boy's resilience, but he himself also felt a growing curiosity about what this wolf was truly capable of. But before proceeding, the owner asked about Doggo's upper limit of soul power, which Zukian revealed that it currently stood at 900, which once again took the owner by surprise. In all his years in the city, the highest soul power he had ever seen from an ordinary snow dire wolf was 800, and that was at the 9-star level. This revelation suggested that Zukian might have discovered a way, or had the opportunity to increase the upper limit of his beast's soul power, hinting at even greater potential. And he was right on the money with his observation, which made Zukian awkwardly smile, and just tried to divert the conversation, quickly asking about how Zuo managed to pass the hard-level trial. And the perceptive old man immediately saw through Zukian's intentions but decided to play along. answering his question anyway. He explained that Zuo had brought an ordinary 8-star fire spirit beast to challenge the trial. At first, she struggled just like Sukian did, failing and leaving the stage halfway through. But she was determined and stayed in the simulation for a whole week. On the 7th day, when her spirit beast broke through to the 9-star level, its soul power surged to 1200. With this newfound strength, she cleared the hard-level trial in one fell swoop, setting a record that remains unbroken to this day. The owner then added, with a hint of challenge in his voice, that if Zukian could break Zuo's record this time, he would prepare another special gift for him. And this offer quickly fueled Zukian's determination, reigniting his drive to push forward. A few moments later, Zukian had returned home and was using his good hand to skillfully pet Doggo while he stared intently at the huge crystal in front of him. And just like its appearance suggested, this crystal was far from ordinary. It was one of the essential materials needed for a snow or ice spirit beast to evolve, and it had been generously given to him by the owner himself. From what Sukian could recall, this item was worth a whopping 250,000 points, but with the help of the quick absorption skill, it should be enough to directly upgrade Doggo to 9 stars, or even beyond. That said, it felt almost wasteful to use such a valuable material solely for ranking up. Yet to unlock the Midas touch skill and strengthen the materials his toad would bring back in the future, Zukian knew he had no choice but to use it now to upgrade Doggo. He couldn't help but think that they were probably the only ones at the university extravagant enough to do such a thing. But this time, something unexpected happened. As Doggo put the crystal in his mouth, it suddenly shattered into pieces, showing clear signs that he was almost done fully absorbing it. This unexpected development surprised Sukian, leading him to suspect that Doggo might have awakened a new skill. But before he could even contemplate what it might be, Doggo suddenly erupted with a powerful aura, indicating that he had completed absorbing the material and had finally reached the 9-star ordinary rank, with an overwhelming soul power of 1300. And just as Zukian had suspected, Doggo's ice breath had evolved into ice mist, allowing him to emit a bone-chilling fog that could obscure the enemy's vision and slow their movements. This development delighted Sukian, as they finally had a control skill in their arsenal. Meanwhile, Doggo was feeling fresh and satisfied with his transformation. But before Doggo could howl in celebration, Zukian stopped him, realizing they had also completed their system task. Not only had they unlocked the new skill, the Midas touch, but they had also gained a new feature that allowed Zukian to view the location of his toad. Furthermore, a new task had appeared, requiring Sukian to guide his snow wolf through its first evolution, and clear the hard difficulty of the training palace, which he can then unlock a powerful host skill upon completion, and it's called the Eye of True Vision. But since finding his toad was a more pressing matter, Zukian set aside the new task and used the tracking feature. To his surprise, the toad was close by. As a matter of fact, it is just right outside the front door, and so he quickly opened the door and was greeted by the gleeful smile of his pet toad, which then excitedly showed off the treasure it had found. And just by looking at it, Zukian could tell that this item was rare. It was a rock crystal shaped like a blooming flower, and is faintly glowing with an eye-catching red hue. But without any prior knowledge of what it was, and unable to recall seeing anything like it in the Schoolpoint store, he decided it would be wise to consult someone knowledgeable, like the owner of the training palace. Without wasting any time, Zukian messaged the owner, sending a picture of the item and asking what it was. The owner's response was immediate and surprised. He identified it as a magma flower, a rare evolution material for fire-type spirit beasts. This was even rarer than the half-piece of the extremely cold ice crystal the owner had previously given him. And so the old man curiously asked where Zukian had found it. But knowing that this boy was stupid, the owner quickly warned him that the magma flower might not be suitable for his snow-dire wolf. So he advised Zukian not to do anything reckless, and suggested he exchange the flower for materials more suitable for his beast's evolution. But he cared none about that shit, especially now that he had the Midas touch skill. So naturally he wanted to see what this magma flower could be enhanced into. So without a second thought, he activated the skill, and immediately, a blinding glow illuminated the room as the magma flower underwent an extreme transformation. Meanwhile, the owner was growing increasingly restless, and with no response from Zukian, his mind wandered to what the foolish boy might be up to. And his concern was heightened, as he realized that Sukian's beast had already reached the 9-star level, meaning it could be guided to evolve through the soul contract already. And naturally, after such an evolution, the beast could potentially break through to the next rank. But Old G also knew that the type of evolutionary material used would significantly influence the evolution path of the contracted beast. For instance, a normal slime could evolve into an ice crystal slime or a lava firework slime, depending on whether the tamer used ice or fire materials. The quality of the materials not only affected the success rate of the evolution, but also determined the resulting strength and abilities of the spirit beast. But this kind of versatility was limited to certain spirit beasts with multiple evolutionary paths, and the snow wolf, unfortunately, did not belong to that category. As a natural ice and snow race, the snow wolf had only one evolutionary path. From ancient times to the present, this remained that way. But it's not like no one has ever tried to evolve their contracted beast to other types. But all such efforts had ended in failure, often with the beast severely injured and nearly dying in the process. And judging by just how stupid this boy was, Old G didn't need to be a mental gymnastics professional to figure out that Sukian might be attempting something incredibly reckless at that very moment, and he couldn't let such potential go to waste. He was determined to stop Sukian from doing something that could get him killed. So he quickly accessed Zukian's address information from the Training Palace library and set off to intervene before it was too late. But just as the had feared, after enhancing the magma flower, transforming it back to its original state from where it had first fully bloomed and full of energy, he excitedly instructed Doggo to use it as evolution material. Despite knowing the significant risks associated with cross-evolution, Sukian was determined to see this through. But he wasn't going into this completely blind. The system had released an evolution task just in time, which made him believe that the system might have sensed that his beast could successfully undertake this challenge. And to mitigate the risks, Sukian explicitly commanded Doggo to retreat at the first sign of trouble. He also reminded him that he could guide Doggo through the soul contract, giving them an additional safety net as long as they knew when to quit. And with this cautious yet determined mindset, they began the process immediately. Meanwhile, Old G was racing toward Zukian's location on his mystical beast, hoping desperately that he wasn't too late. But unfortunately for him, the two idiots had already started the evolution ritual. The magma flower was being consumed by Doggo, and a powerful aura resembling a wolf had formed behind him, demonstrating just how serious and focused they were on the task at hand. So even when Old G finally burst through the door, intending to stop them, he froze midway as soon as he saw Doggo's posture. This struck a chord deep within him. It reminded him of something Zuo Jin had once told him, about spirit beasts that evolved across categories and awakened new skills. A phenomenon he called super-category evolution. And from what Old G was witnessing, it seemed that very anomaly was now unfolding before his eyes in real time. And not long after, Doggo successfully completed its cross-evolution, gaining a new fire companion skill called Flame Vortex, which allowed it to generate a vortex of flames with powerful suction, capable of devouring enemies. But before they could celebrate this achievement, they noticed Old G's presence, catching them off guard. They knew what they had done was risky, but thankfully, all seemed to be well, and Zukian had even hidden the toad in his spirit domain, hoping to avoid suspicion. But Old G, with his years of experience, quickly caught on to something. He immediately questioned why Doggo had evolved, but hadn't broken through to the elite level. And this sharp observation shook Doggo, fearing their cover might be blown. But with Zukian's fast thinking, he managed to come up with an explanation. He told Old G that Doggo had deliberately stayed at the 9th star because they wanted another shot at the hard difficulty trial, seeking revenge on those ice tyrannosaurs. And Old G was amused by this reasoning, and just laughed heartily, as it reminded him of his own youthful days when he might have done the same in their position. With this, he decided to let the matter rest, and expressed his anticipation for their performance in the upcoming trial. And with such support, Sukian and Doggo were more fired up than ever to prove themselves. After that, Old Man left and the coast was clear. Zukian summoned his toad back, sharing a moment of bonding as they reflected on how close they had come to having their secret exposed, where he has the ability to have two beasts despite being just a novice tamer. But their sweet moment was short-lived, as the toad's natural instinct soon called it to seek out more treasures. And since he can't do nothing about it, Zukian simply asked the toad to take care and reminded it to also find materials for its own upgrade and evolution. The toad appreciated this, hopping off Zukian's head and waved goodbye. But before it left, Zukian called it back, cuddling his toad to show affection while using his good hand skill to increase its soul power. And with that, the busy day finally came to an end, and another dawn arrived. And now the two were back inside the hard difficulty trial, ready to challenge the ice tyrannosaurs once again. But with their newfound power, Zukian and Doggo were more than excited to test their limits. Meanwhile, outside the trial, the worker asked the owner what he would award Zukian if he managed to take the top spot again. The owner paused to consider, realizing that with Zukin's beast now being significantly different from yesterday, the reward would also need to be adjusted accordingly. Back in the trial, the ice tyrannosaurs charged in groups, ready to overwhelm Zukian once more. But unlike before, when uncertainty and fear plagued them, this time they were determined to go all out without hesitation, activating the night battle skill. Doggo skillfully positioned himself to make the most of his new ice mist ability. The mist not only concealed his movements, but also slowed down all the enemies in the vicinity. And using this tactic, Doggo easily weaved through the beasts and was about to deliver his final fade. But like before, the Tyrannosaurs once again relied on their ice armor, thinking it would be enough to negate Doggo's attack. But unfortunately for it, Doggo now had an ace up his sleeve. All he needed was to immobilize the beasts for his plan to work. So with precise timing, Doggo completely dogged on them, smacking them to the ground, and then unleashed the newly acquired Flame Vortex skill. And the pull of the vortex was so powerful that the Tyrannosaurs couldn't escape once they were caught inside, and the intense heat quickly melted their precious ice armor, which they had been so proud of, and obliterated them in the process. And this immediately shocked the worker. Judging from the combat power displayed by Zukian and his Snow Wolf, it was clear that their soul power upper limit was at least above 1500, surpassing even many elite 1-star spirit beasts. But what was even more surprising was that a Snow Wolf, typically associated with ice, could actually conjure a fire skill, while the owner pretended like he was unfazed at all, acting as if he hadn't been panicking just the day before. And he even had the audacity to nonchalantly suggest to the worker that he should read more books about super evolution, implying that ignorance was the only reason for his surprise, despite having made the same shocked face himself not too long ago. But the fight wasn't over yet. There were still 162 beasts remaining before Zukian could clear the trial, and only an hour left to take the #1 spot from Weixu. The stakes were high, and there was no room for error. A single mistake could mean that the stolen soul energy wouldn't be enough to sustain the flame vortex, leading to a disastrous outcome. Luckily, they were a duo of focus, commitment, and sheer fucking will. With these qualities driving them, they successfully completed the challenge and emerged from the trial proud of their accomplishment. With this, they eagerly asked the old man how long it had taken them to clear the trial and whether they had secured the top spot. And just as Zukian had hoped, they had indeed claimed first place, and with almost half an hour to spare. And this greatly impressed the owner, who now believed that if Zukian were to participate in the league, he could finally fulfill their long-cherished wish that had been held for 10 years. In the previous chapter, Zukian failed conquering the hard difficulty trial, but after the owner hooked him up with the good stuff, and his plug, which I mean the toad, coming back with the high-grade evolution material, his wolf had a rush of a lifetime and quickly shot up to rank 9 and gained a fire-type skill. With this, they had easily defeated the hard difficulty and took the #1 spot. Now on to the next part. The owner asked what Shu Qian wanted as a reward, to which Shu Qian shyly replied that he would accept whatever was given. After all, the owner was still in charge. Seeing this, the owner thought it best to gift him a rare spiritual beast, especially since Shu Qian's wolf was on the verge of breaking through to the elite level. With that milestone, Zhugen would soon become an apprentice tamer, opening up the opportunity to tame another beast. But no such spirit beast could be found inside the training palace because, let's face it, they couldn't possibly keep a rare spirit beast without a contract. It's just not happening. But the palace had prepared a special gift for him, though the big reveal would only happen once he was officially promoted to apprentice tamer. So Shu Qian was told to come back when the time was right. This news just tugged at Shu Qian's strings, as the owner seemed intent on keeping him in suspense. But since there wasn't much he could do about it, he simply promised to return after the selection competition, confident that he would be an apprentice tamer by then. As he was about to leave, Zhu Qian suddenly remembered that he had also completed a system task. He whipped out his phone and confirmed that he had indeed finished it, which unlocked the Eye of True Vision, allowing him to see the basic information of spirit beasts and items without even needing to use the system phone. Naturally, he tried out this new skill immediately and was thrilled when he could directly view Doggo's information. It was a game changer, making everything so much easier and more convenient for him. Meanwhile, the trio who had recently become Shu Qian's biggest fans were shocked to see that the hard difficulty trial list had been updated, and at the top was none other than Shu Qian and Doggo themselves. But this just bummed the girl out big time, as she didn't even get to see Doggo in action. But they ain't gonna lie, this was an incredible feat. It hadn't been that long since Shu Qian had taken the top spot at the easy difficulty level, and now here he was, claiming the top spot in the hard difficulty without them even noticing. This just solidified why they were such big fans of Shu Qian, and with this, the girl was more determined than ever not to miss out next time. 10 days later, the freshman tryouts day had finally arrived, and now every freshman was gathered in one spot. Yun Yao was explaining the overall rules of the competition, which used a challenge system. Basically, if someone could hold a training ground and defeat all challengers, they'd have a shot at being selected to participate in the Yunzhou Northern League. But before diving into the details, she mentioned hearing about what Shu Qian recently pulled off at the training hall. Apparently, He'd taken the top spot in the hard difficulty, which was impressive on its own. But then she learned that he immediately used the evolution material the owner gave him as an upgrade material. That totally shocked her because honestly, that was a stupid move. But Shu Qian wasn't done surprising her. He casually revealed that his toad came back with an even better evolution material. The lava flower. This left Yun Yao dumbfounded since it was a different element than his dog. And he couldn't be that stupid to use it, right? But Shu Qian just grinned and showed her that it worked. And hey, if it's stupid but works, then it's not stupid. Now, Doggo can breathe fire. Meanwhile, Zhang Hao was feeling himself, standing on top of the arena with a solid win streak. With no one challenging him, the top spot was practically his for the taking. Most of the students weren't even trying because his mischievous beast was not only strong, but also a fire element, which put all the ice pet owners at a serious disadvantage. So they were just idling around, hoping someone strong enough would take down this arrogant guy. But it seemed like their wishful thinking might come true, as Zhang Hao had noticed Shu Qian's presence and proposed that he come into the ring and fight him. This left Shu Qian speechless. This guy was still the same battle maniac as before, but Shu Qian wasn't backing down. Not after powering up and gaining a new skill. With the freedom to use everything they've got this time, the two were more than excited to face off. Meanwhile, the other students watched Suqian with skepticism, wondering how he even dared to challenge someone like Zhang Hao, especially with a snow dire wolf as his pet. One of them even advised him to step down before embarrassing himself. But this was to be expected from filthy casuals who don't know any better, and were just stuck in the current meta, as they never bothered to explore other options or strategies. While Zheng Hao, on the other hand, viewed Zuqian as a worthy rival, but he was confident in his ability to defeat Zuqian this time. Having spent the past days honing his skills, his pet had also been promoted to 9 stars, and Zheng Hao was eager to test its strength against Zuqian's wolf once more, which made Zuqian smirk a little bit, as he knew he got this on the bag, as he too had been improving and had completely revamped his tactics. But rather than keep his strategy in the shadows, he decided to reveal it proudly. Activating the flaming vortex, Doggo's entire body became engulfed in intense flames that shot up to the very top of the arena, greatly intimidating Zheng Hao and his beast, as this was Zuqian's way of saying their fire skills ain't shit compared to his. And Zheng Hao wouldn't just take that taunt lightly, and so he decided to counter with his flame giant skill, hoping to match Doggo's flaming vortex, as his mischievous beast transformed into a fire giant. Zheng Hao and the onlookers were shocked to realize they had made a grave mistake. The suction power of Doggo's flaming vortex was so intense that it began pulling in the fire giant, proving its limitless sucking ability. And this display left the audience completely stunned, and the sheer power of the flaming vortex was evident as its heat waves reached the spectators' seats. And just within moments, Zheng Hao's fire elf was completely drawn into the vortex, with no chance of escape. And just seconds later, it emerged, exhausted and defeated, which Zheng Hao found himself in disbelief, as he never expected to be bested by another fire-type skill. And the students who had been mocking Zuqian weren't different either, as they were unable to comprehend how a snow wolf could wield such a powerful fire skill. As for Zuqian, he calmly stepped down from the arena as if nothing had happened, already accustomed to the astonished reactions of those around him. But their attention was quickly diverted to another platform that is getting heated up with the battle, and it seems like this involved the pink-haired girl, facing off against a member of the notorious trio who had stolen other groups' points in the snowy plains. Unfortunately for the girl, her plan for revenge wasn't going as she had hoped. Her beast was being completely overpowered by this smug opponent. The guy, just like the others in his group, wore a self-satisfied smirk, acting as if he was untouchable, while his pet mirrored his arrogance, as it has a fierce-looking mix of bear and pit bull, who is likely named Cupcake, and this brunette felt no remorse for stealing points from others. In fact, he believed it was justified, citing the wilderness as a place where the strong prey on the weak, which is a viable excuse if you are really, the strongest. But like they say, there's always a bigger fish, so keep yourself humble, alright? But this little shit doesn't know that concept. He even had the nerve to suggest that the girl should be grateful, after all. They only wanted some points, unlike the evil organizations or poachers who would take everything, including her life. But the pink-haired girl wasn't about to let that slide, and so she clapped back, pointing out how he had just admitted to being no better than those same evil organizations he claimed to be different from, which quickly stung the douche where it hurts. And he won't lie. If her spirit beast was half as strong as her sharp tongue, they wouldn't be stuck here trading insults. And just right after, the brunette ordered his beast to finish off the girl's creature once and for all. And instantly, the furball was smacked to the ground and was quickly defeated. But it seemed that wasn't enough for him. As they were about to deliver a final blow, sending the pet to the afterlife before the girl could even unsummon it. And this extreme cruelty infuriated Yunya, who was ready to step in, confident that her own beast would win as it had risen to 9 stars. But before she could act, Jukin stepped in first, knowing that her beast wouldn't be enough, as in front of them is already a 1-star elite rank beast. So just as the leopard was about to finish the job, Doggo intervened at the last possible second, saving the pink-haired girl's beast from certain doom, which completely shocked the girl, as she never had expected to see the guy she'd been dissing since day 1 was the first to rush in and save her beast, and therefore she saw Zukian in a new light. But just like before, the brunette was too full of himself. After seeing that he was just up against a snow wolf, he dismissed Doggo as unworthy of his time and let his leopard do whatever it wanted while he turned away to rest. But as soon as he did, Doggo unleashed his fire vortex once more, instantly proving that he was not to be disrespected. And the sheer power of the vortex put the brunette on high alert as he realized to his disbelief that a 9-star beast could exude an aura with stronger oppressive power than his 1-star elite leopard. Still, like other filthy casuals, the brunette clung to his belief that he was superior simply because his beast was 1 rank above Doggo. So he quickly regained his composure, but Zukian could easily see through his facade. The brunette was nothing more than a coward who liked to bully weaker tamers to compensate for his insecurities. This observation cut deep, enraging both the brunette and his leopard, prompting them to unleash their best skills, such as primitive hunting and ice armor. And upon seeing this, the pink-haired girl was quickly taken aback, realizing she truly hadn't stood a chance earlier. The leopard hadn't even bothered to use its skills against her. Meanwhile, Zukian just laughed maniacally, as he recognized how favorable these skills were for him, as dealing with opponents like this was right up his alley, especially since he had enough soul power to use his flame vortex a few more times. And so this ice leopard was nothing more than a rabid kitten. He unleashed the flame vortex once more, halting the leopard in its tracks. But the brunette was too stupid enough to believe that his ice armor could withstand the flames and pressed forward, urging his leopard to attack Doggo at the center of the vortex. Even Zukian was momentarily stunned by the sheer stupidity of the move, while Zheng Hao, watching from the sidelines, couldn't believe his eyes as well. Even his own fire beast wouldn't dare enter that vortex again, knowing the danger it posed. As this flame vortex was a companion skill, meaning that even though it came from a 9-star ordinary rank beast, it was far more powerful than most 1-star elite rank spirit beast skills. And with that, the leopard ended up completely barbecued from head to toe, leaving the brunette in utter shock. However, this fool wasn't ready to give up just yet, believing that Zukian couldn't possibly use the flame vortex again. So he commanded his leopard to get up, thinking it was their turn to retaliate. But at this point, he was just embarrassing himself. With this, another member of the notorious trio decided to jump in. He summoned his 1-star elite rank mud golem, confident that as a rock-type beast, it would be impervious to Zukian's fire-based skills. So the golem just throws itself towards them. And these dudes just can't stop themselves to act like they are worth shit, all smirking cause they really think his golem's defense would be impenetrable since he can't use his fire skill. Like bitch, he is called a snow wolf for a reason, and so he showed to these fools his ice mist ability, which greatly slowed down the golem's speed, making it easier for the golem to catch these hands. But this guy tries his best to keep his composure, pretending to be unfazed, and just used its companion skill to try and hinder Doggo's speed, which Zukian found this attempt utterly useless, which also bore him out, leading him to wish it were night so he could use his night battle skill and get this over with. Luckily, he still had enough left for one more use of the flame vortex, so it seems he would just be using that. Meanwhile, in another part of the gym, Jiang and his crew had just arrived, with Zhang all fired up after upgrading his beast to 8 stars. He was thinking of challenging Zukian, but those plans were quickly shelved as they witnessed what Zukian was truly capable of, as he was casually activating a flame skill from a snow wolf, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. After that, Zukian made quick work of the mud golem, hardening its rock-like body with his flame skill and rendering its attacks useless. He then used the golem's now solidified form as a platform to close in and land more blows, which completely broke the stoic act of this bitch, who was baffled as to how Doggo hadn't depleted its soul power after using the flame vortex multiple times, to which Zukian proudly revealed that it is all because it's a companion skill. Moreover, Doggo has that eating habits passive ability, but that would remain a secret for now. And as Doggo continued throwing haymakers left and right, something odd started happening. He began missing his shots. It didn't take long for Zukian to realize that these guys were fighting dirty. It was 2 against 1. And the reason Doggo was off target was because of a bell-like spirit beast the other opponent had. This beast could use a mental attack that caused its target to become addicted to the sound, inducing hallucinations. And Yun Yao was immediately pissed, But just as Yunyao was about to step in and show them what real teamwork looked like, Zukian stopped her, signaling that they still had a few tricks up their sleeves. He then commanded Doggo to stop holding back, which Doggo understood. Right then and there, Doggo began his evolution, catching everyone off guard. The sudden evolution stunned the entire gym, even surprising the professor who had been observing from the sidelines. It was his first time witnessing a beast evolve after deliberately suppressing itself, and the process was far more flashy and intense than a typical evolution. And with this, Doggo had finally reached the 1-star elite rank, boasting a power limit of 2700. Along with this newfound strength, Doggo also unlocked a new skill called Wolf Dance, which greatly enhanced his limbs and tail, turning them into formidable weapons. Even Zukian noticed changes within himself, as he was promoted to the apprentice level, further enhancing his good hand skill. As Doggo's evolution completed, the two enemy beasts quickly realized they were now facing a completely different opponent. But unfortunately for them, their masters remained oblivious, foolishly believing they still had time to strike, assuming Doggo was unfamiliar with his newfound power since he had just ranked up. But this was nothing more than wishful thinking, as the Cursed Bell's mental attacks were now utterly ineffective, and Zukian decided to demonstrate what a true mental skill looked like, commanding Doggo to use his deterrence skill, which instantly knocked the bell beast unconscious, dropping it to the floor, completely surprising the guy. But unfortunately for him, Zukian wasn't done, and just doubles down with the fade. And they could instantly see what he was cooking ain't simple, and just by the looks of it, this wolf is about to launch an avalanche skill, and they could only scream in disbelief. And not long after, they received the full blast of that said skill, which ultimately defeated this group of nobodies, leaving them completely overpowered and humiliated. In the previous chapter, after taking the #1 spot in the hard difficulty trial, the owner promised Zukian a gift if he reached the apprentice level. Eager to claim his reward, he quickly attended the freshman tryouts, where he overpowered every opponent with his fire vortex skill. Surprisingly, he met the seniors of the trio that had been stealing points from other students. Seeing that they weren't even remorseful for their actions, Zukian decided to step in and teach them a lesson they wouldn't forget. And as expected, these guys didn't plan on fighting fair, turning the battle into a 1v3. Realizing this, Zukian decided not to hold back any longer and allowed Doggo to evolve to the 1-star elite rank. With this power boost, they easily overpowered the trio using their avalanche skill, leaving them no chance to retaliate. Now on to the next part. Everyone was in shock and struggling to process what had just happened right before their eyes. Even Zhang was totally baffled. But with this, he connected the dots and finally understood how Zukian was able to kill so many monsters and rack up so many points, and that it was all thanks to that avalanche skill. But with that realization, a bitter truth hit him, and that he had lost any chance of competing with this Zukian guy. Meanwhile, the trio was barely holding their ground, having also been hit by the skill. It felt like they had been run over by a truck. With this, Yunyao couldn't help but feel a little smug at seeing their sorry state, while Zheng Hao, on the other hand, had a more sobering realization, as he now fully understood just how terrifying Zukian and his dog were. With that kind of destructive power, even if the dog had some limitations, he knew his own beast wouldn't stand a chance. But with that said, the three hadn't fully given up yet, despite their opponent having two powerful skills with polar opposite elements, and wasn't showing any signs of fatigue even after using them multiple times. They were desperate to salvage any reputation they have, so they still try to figure out a way to defeat Zukian. And it didn't help that the most stupidest of the bunch kept encouraging them to fight. But unfortunately for them, though, the teacher had finally had enough of their audacity for one day. He had let them run wild for a while, just to see what the others were capable of. But now that he was satisfied with what he had observed, he didn't need their tomfoolery anymore. So he gave them a sharp reminder that the school was well aware of their antics, and that there would be appropriate penalties, which quickly shook up the group. And just like before, Zukian, being the master of rage-baiting that he was, he seized the opportunity to mock them for their predicament, which was very effective. But they knew there was nothing they could do, especially with the teacher's eyes on them, and with Zukian still full of energy, they had no choice but to let it slide. And judging from what Zukian had showcased, it seemed like no one would dare challenge him. If that were to continue, Zukian might just be selected as a reserve player for the league. But before things could escalate further, the teacher stepped in to remind everyone about the rules of the battle, and that the freshman selection competition was strictly one-on-one. Anyone who broke the rules would be punished accordingly. But even with that warning, it seemed like no one really had the courage to challenge Zukian anymore, which Zukian quickly seized the moment to troll everyone even harder, taunting them to fight him because he was supposedly very weak after the 3v1 match. But the students knew he was lying, and so his taunts were ridiculously effective, causing everyone's blood pressure to spike as they all wished they could beat Zukian to a pulp. But as the teacher had clearly stated, they could only fight one-on-one, and they knew they didn't stand a chance against him. So they were left with nothing but empty threats and frustrated barking. And to make matters worse, Sukian just kept doubling down on the taunts, driving everyone even more crazy. Even the trio that had faced him earlier were sulking in the corner, fully realizing that Sukian was a monster and that they were lucky enough to survive an encounter with him. And this back and forth went on for a while, with no one willing to step up and challenge Sukian. Finally, the teacher reminded the students that if no one was brave enough to face him, Sukian would be declared the champion of this training ground. And although they were unwilling to accept this, none of them had the guts to do anything about it. So they remained silent, facing the hard truth, and that the skill issue was real. And with that settled, Sukian still had some unfinished business with the owner of the training palace. So he quickly stepped down from the platform and casually asked Yunyao if she wanted to join him. But she flat out refused, determined to claim a platform for herself and fight for the championship. So it seems like he'd have to meet old Ji alone. Well, almost alone, as Zheng Hao tried to get his attention, eager to tag along to the training palace. But since they weren't really that close, Zuqian pretended not to notice him. A few moments later, Zuqian arrived in front of old Ji's room, and the old man was delighted to see him so quickly, as it confirmed his belief that this boy could truly accomplish what he had in mind. But before they got to the gifts, old Ji asked if Zuqian had won the trials, which Zuqian gladly confirmed it, though it was no surprise, after all. His dog was the only snow beast that could use a fire skill, and with that out of the way, old Ji proceeded to reveal his gift, and he specifically wanted Zuqian to reach the apprentice level so he could contract another beast. With this, Zuqian could only smile awkwardly, knowing that not only did he already have 2 beasts, but he could also contract 2 more if he wanted to. This was practically unheard of, but as Luliang had advised, no one could know about this, so it remained a closely guarded secret. And since Zuqian seemed to have a hunch about what the gift might be, old Ji went ahead and asked if he knew anything about mechanical intelligent spirit beasts. And judging by Zuqian's reaction, it was clear he didn't, so old Ji explained further, revealing that in some places on Lingsing, there are mechanical creatures that live like spirit beasts. Although they are made of machines, they possess the characteristics of spirit beasts, one of which is that they can be controlled through a spirit contract. People currently speculate that these mechanical spirit beasts were created specifically to serve humans. As a result, when forming a contract with a mechanical spirit beast, the contract is rarely rejected unless there's a massive difference in soul power. Even if the contract is later terminated, there are no side effects. This was pretty shocking news for Zuqian. The idea that you could sign a contract at any time and terminate it without consequences seemed almost too good to be true. So naturally, he asked what the catch was, which old Ji then revealed the only drawback is that the levels and soul powers of mechanical spirit beasts are fixed at birth. Unless they are fused with other mechanical spirit beasts, their levels and soul powers cannot be increased through normal means. And with that said, old Ji revealed that the box he was giving Zuqian contained exactly that kind of mechanical beast. He had specifically wanted to give this to Zuqian as soon as he was promoted to apprentice level since he couldn't force him to take away his contract quota. And given that Zuqian had come here so quickly, old Ji was confident that he hadn't contracted a second spirit beast yet. In this case, the mechanical spirit beast was the perfect choice for him, as he could simply cancel the contract if he found a more suitable pet for his second contract. And this made Zuqian feel a bit guilty, but he figured that old Ji wouldn't be hurt by what he didn't know, so he decided to proceed as if everything was normal. And when he opened the box, he was surprised to find a glove inside, and as soon as he put it on, he could sense that it was indeed a mechanical beast, prompting him to use his eye vision to learn more about it. And to his surprise, it had 7,177 soul power, and a unique skill called Protective Shield, which allowed the tamer to materialize a shield that could absorb damage equal to its soul value. However, the shield would disappear after being broken, or after an hour, and it had a cooldown time of a whole day. Still, this was a really helpful skill, so Zuqian formed a contract with the mechanical beast, and just as old Ji had said, the process was smooth and without any obstacles, which delighted him quite so. And since he was eager to see what the shield could do, he quickly activated it and asked Doggo to attack him. And Doggo was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed. Meanwhile, old Ji was just too stunned to speak, unable to believe that these 2 idiots were doing whatever they wanted inside his office without even asking for permission. But since they were just being their usual selves, he decided it was better to just let them be. After a few more hits, Zuqian was thrilled with the results. The shield was quite effective in defending as long as he maintained its soul power. With this newfound confidence, he immediately thanked old Ji for the gift, appreciating how practical it was and how it was exactly what he needed. And old Ji was pleased by this, but he also reminded Zuqian not to use his skills in the office, as he couldn't afford to have them wrecking the place with their almost unlimited soul power. But speaking of soul power, Zuqian was reminded of his good hand skill and wondered if he could use it to enhance his gloves. It just so happened that his physique had improved upon ranking up to apprentice tamer, and even his soul power had increased to 1,000. With this in mind, he decided to put his theory to the test, and just as he had hoped, he managed to expend 500 soul power to enhance his glove, boosting its overall soul limit by 100, completely bypassing its limitation without needing another mechanical beast. And this discovery greatly delighted him, as it opened up a huge opportunity. Perhaps even in the future, they could even upgrade and evolve any mechanical beast they got their hands on. And he fully believed this wasn't a stretch, especially after his good hand skill was enhanced. And coupled with his 1,000 soul power, he could easily increase any beast's soul power by 200 at a time. Unfortunately, he couldn't use all his soul power for this purpose, as he still needed to save some for his companion skills, meaning he couldn't be as free with it as before. Nonetheless, with this glove, he felt much safer when fighting in the wild. Doggo wouldn't need to protect him anymore, allowing him to fully focus on his own fights, which motivated him even more to reach the professional rank as quickly as possible. As Zuqian had heard that after reaching that stage, some skills or companion skills from his beasts could be used by the soul tamer himself, effectively doubling their overall fighting capabilities. This would allow him to fully support Doggo in battle, making them an even more formidable team. And with this in mind, as soon as the next day arrived, Zuqian wasted no time and headed straight back to the university battleground. Upon his arrival, he was greeted by the professor, who quickly recognized him and informed him about the points he had earned from defending his title, around 50,000 points. But given the materials Zuqian had been using lately, he felt that this amount wasn't quite enough to sustain his extravagant lifestyle. But his train of thought was suddenly interrupted when Yunyao and Luliang called out his name, and they were brimming with excitement as they shared the news that they, too, had defended titles and were selected as reserve players for the league, just like him. And of course, they credited Zuqian for their success, explaining that after he defeated the 1-star elite beast, the ones who had 9-star ordinary rank beasts finally had the chance to fight for themselves. And thanks to the points they earned from the championship, they had successfully evolved their spirit beasts and promoted them to elite level. Even Zhenghao was able to catch up thanks to Zuqian. Since his beast was defeated by a fire skill, it recovered quickly and managed to secure one of the rings. But they weren't the only ones happy to see Zuqian. After witnessing his capabilities, several others quickly jumped at the chance to join him in the upcoming challenge, a stark contrast from when he struggled to find a third member for the training camp. But speaking of the trial, it seemed like they would have to enter a foreign land just like last time, which the teacher confirmed this, but added that this time there would only be 10 participants in total. They would be entering the new world of Snowfield alongside freshmen selected from the other 6 top schools in Snowfield. And this excited Zhenghao, as he was eager to meet new tamers and face off against them in battle. And so he quickly asked the teacher what their goal would be upon entering the new world, which the teacher explained that the main objective was to train their actual combat abilities, as the mutant beasts inside the new realm were far more challenging than those outside. And of course, as usual, there would be competition between the schools. But this time, 7 universities had joined forces to offer generous rewards to the winning team. And most importantly, the thing they need to compete for this time is mutant spirit crystals. The school and the army have secured an area that hasn't yet been fully cleared, an underground cave that branches off in different directions, and the cave consists of 3 floors, with more powerful mutant beasts appearing the deeper they go. These mutants are entirely different from the ones outside. When defeated, they drop something called a mutant spirit crystal, which is what they need to collect, and the school can easily appraise the crystal's rarity based on their color. In the outermost part of the underground, the crystals are transparent and colorless, but as the level of the defeated monster increases, the crystal's color darkens. Naturally, the darker the crystal, the higher the points it's worth. But that's not all they have to deal with. Upon entering the underground cave, the location of the outer layer is random, so their first challenge is to find the nearest teammate and cooperate from there. But just as the teacher finished explaining, a system task suddenly materialized for Zuqian. The task required him to investigate the abnormality within the underground palace and its attendants. Upon completion, he would unlock an exclusive companion skill for his protective gloves called Frame Sync, which would allow the shield to be used by another contracted beast. And this was an incredibly useful skill to have, and since Zuqian was already planning to uncover the truth about this new world, this mission felt like a bonus. But he knew his current strength wasn't enough, so his priority would be to power up first. And with that settled, the teacher informed them to gather in 2 days, as he would personally send them to the new land to start the competition, to which the students roared in confirmation. excited to make a name for themselves and uphold the honor of their school. And they were confident, knowing they were the elites of the freshman class, and that everyone here was competent and ready for the challenge. The previous chapter, after successfully defending his platform, Zukian returned to Old Ji, who, as promised, handed him his gift. It turned out to be a mech spirit beast, a perfect match for Zukian. This new beast allowed him to defend himself without relying solely on Dogo for protection. What made it even more impressive was that Zukian could use his good hand ability on it, increasing its soul limit and making the shield even more durable. With this newfound power, Zukian felt more determined than ever to face the challenges ahead. So without wasting any time, he headed back to the university's battleground to claim his reward and prepare for the next trial. To his surprise, 2 of his friends had also been chosen as representatives, and surprisingly, even Zheng Hao made the cut. But it seemed that the Yunzhou Northern League, where they were set to compete, would start at a later date. The teacher informed them that they should return in a couple of days, at which point he would take them to the competition site. The students understood and agreed to the plan, readying themselves for what was to come. Now on to the next part. 2 days later, at the entrance of Icefield University, students gathered around just as the teacher had instructed. But it seemed like they had been waiting there for a while, growing increasingly impatient. But as if on cue, the professor finally appeared, all mysterious and shit. What puzzled them even more was the complete lack of any visible vehicle nearby. This, of course, raised the question of how exactly he planned to get them to their destination. And without a word, the professor answered them by summoning a freaking big-ass aircraft out of nowhere. And it turns out that this thing was a mechanical beast, and it's radiating power with an overwhelming soul limit, almost hitting the 100K mark. And just, the sight of such an impressive mech beast only made Zukian more excited, as he wondered if his gloves could be upgraded to something like this in the future. But now that the massive aircraft was fully summoned, the professor didn't waste any time and commanded everyone to get their asses moving and board the mech. And so they did just that. And because this beast was fast, efficient, and surprisingly convenient to ride on, the students were instantly sold on the idea of contracting a mechanical beast like this one day. And before they knew it, the aircraft had effortlessly arrived at their destination inside the void. But as the students stepped out, they were immediately taken aback by the unexpected atmosphere surrounding the place. The air was so dense with pressure that it was hard for them to breathe, and nausea hit them like a truck. Even Zheng Hao was off to the side puking rainbows. And naturally, the teacher explained that this was a common reaction, given the unique characteristics of the new land. With their current physiques, they could only safely stay for 5 days at most. Therefore, after 3 days, the 7-school joint trial would come to an end, and the teachers would send them back to school. But there was no need to worry too much. If they encountered a crisis that couldn't be resolved, they could simply press the call for help button provided to them in advance, and the teachers from each school would then enter the underground palace to rescue them, though at the cost of losing their qualification for the trial. And of course, this made the students wonder what would happen if they stayed beyond the 5-day limit, to which the teacher clarified that it was quite simple, and that they'd lose their minds and go completely crazy. And Zukian immediately believed this, as judging by the emotions coming from his spirit domain, even Doggo wasn't too fond of this place, which then led him to wonder how this strange new world had even formed. But their thoughts were soon interrupted by the appearance of another large beast, signaling the arrival of students from other universities. And as soon as they disembarked, the professors greeted one another, noting how strong each student looked. But one student in particular stood out. They had heard that a student from Icefield University had taken the #1 spot in one of the difficulty levels of the training palace, and they were eager to meet this kid. And it certainly didn't help that Sukian's teacher used this as an opportunity to boast about him and his school, suggesting that Sukian would likely lead their school to victory. Meanwhile, Sukian just stood there, feeling awkward and unsure of what to do. But Sukian couldn't help but think that his teacher Zheng wasn't exactly exaggerating either, as wherever he went, he aimed to be the best and win it all, and that wouldn't change even now. And with everyone now present, the professor agreed to kick off the competition. With this, they formed a mass teleportation spell that quickly enveloped every student in soul energy, and then instantly transporting them into the underground cave. And as expected, they were teleported to random locations, each one alone. Fortunately for Zukian, he quickly ran into one of his schoolmates, who was equally delighted to see a familiar face. And so the student eagerly shook Sukian's hand and introduced himself as Wang Kang. And he proudly mentioned that his spirit beast was also a 1-star elite rank, and it was a ghost type which he believed would play a significant role in a place like this. And since it was a school competition after all, Sukian decided to team up with Wang Kang. And as it turned out, Wang Kang wasn't wrong about his beast's usefulness. The ghost-type spirit beast effortlessly illuminated their path with its mere presence, which made any lone mutant beast think twice before approaching them. But still, Wang Kong was really on edge, as the aura of the mutant beasts in this place was so strong that he couldn't even sense their locations. No matter how hard he tried, suddenly, he was caught off guard as he noticed multiple glowing eyes just beyond the darkness ahead. But with the element of surprise now lost, the beasts revealed themselves, and it was a horde of massive spiders. And just like any normal human faced with such a nightmare, Zukian didn't waste a second before lighting these mofos up, taking them out before they could even get close. And since it was already nighttime, they were able to use the night battle skill, which made the fight even quicker. And soon enough, the spiders were sprawled out lifeless on the ground. While Wang Kong was genuinely surprised by this display, and that Zukian's true strength was even more terrifying than the rumors had suggested. No wonder he could break records in the hard difficulty trial at the training palace. But as they were collecting crystals from the fallen beasts, another creature suddenly emerged from behind, and its intense bloodlust palpable. As this time it was a different kind of spider, more venomous and far stronger, as it was a 2-star elite rank. And this one wasn't playing around, as it was out to kill on sight. Fortunately, Doggo's insane reaction time saved them, diverting the initial attack and killing the spider before it could launch another strike. Afterwards, Zukian reminded Wang Kong to be more careful next time, to which Kang thanked him. But Zukian responded that it was a little too early to be saying thanks, as they still had to deal with the rest of these dark spiders, which completely shocked Kang, as the remaining spiders were far more numerous than the first set. But still, with the combined power of the wolf and the ghost, they managed to defeat the hordes with surprising ease, and the added illumination from Wang Kong's ghost made it easier to see everything, giving them a clear advantage in the dim cave. As a result of their success, both beasts upgraded to elite 2-star ranks. Just as the teacher had mentioned, the crystals they collected were showing signs of getting darker, a clear indication of their growing power. And the amount they had accumulated really set them up well for the early game. But this still wasn't enough for Zukian, so he urged Kang to hurry up, as they needed to reach the second floor faster than the other teams if they wanted to stay ahead. And this display of determination inspired Kang, and therefore made up his mind to stick with him, confident that Zukian would lead him to greater heights. But as they ventured deeper into the cave, another problem arose. As the path splits into multiple choices, presenting them with a dilemma, there was a chance that taking one of these paths might lead them away from any other schoolmates. Although everyone's spirit beasts had been upgraded, it was still safer to group together. While the second floor might not pose a significant threat, advancing to the third floor with just the two of them would definitely be dangerous. Faced with this critical decision, they knew they had to think carefully about which path to take. But just then, their attention was abruptly diverted by a noise coming from the other side of the cave. It didn't sound like the dark spiders they had encountered earlier, which meant a new challenge might be looming. And as if that wasn't suspicious enough, the noise suddenly stopped the moment they noticed it, putting them on high alert. And just as they expected, it was indeed different, as a burst of flame came hurtling toward them at top speed. With this, they braced themselves for a fight, only to realize it was just Zheng Hao, using his skill to sprint through the cave like the maniac that he was. And so Zukian immediately called him out, pointing out how recklessly stupid that move was, as Zukian could have easily been attacked on sight if he hadn't recognized him in time. Thankfully, he was cautious enough to wait before getting too close, avoiding what could have been a disastrous case of friendly fire. Despite this, they were relieved to have grouped up, as this cave was anything but simple, with paths leading to intersection after intersection, forcing them to circle back repeatedly. Still with determination, they finally arrived at a place where flowers bloomed and glowing with a violet hue, a clear sign that they had successfully entered the second floor. However, the path ahead had become even more complicated, and with no other choice, Zheng Hao was forced to use his Beast Shadow Clone Jutsu to scout and find the best route. Although this consumed a significant amount of soul power, it was the best strategy they had to stay ahead of the other schools. Fortunately, even Kang's Fire Ghost could clone itself, doubling their scouting efficiency. And seeing how effective the clone technique was, Zukian and Doggo realized they, too, needed to learn Flame Clone for themselves. It wasn't just strong, it was a versatile and useful skill in almost any circumstance. But just a few moments later, Zheng Hao's mischievous beast returned alone, sporting a worried expression, in which confused Zheng Hao, but it was clear that something had gone wrong. But before he could even fully grasp what his beast was saying, Zukian stepped in and translated it, and that up ahead of them there was a horde of shadow cat demons chasing it. And Zheng Hao was completely taken aback, wondering how on earth Zukian could understand his beast better than he could. But it seems like there was no time to dwell on that, as the shadow cat demons were close, and they weren't alone. As it turned out, They were also chasing another group of students who were clearly regretting their life choices leading up to this predicament. But the sight of other people gave those students a glimmer of hope. They knew that banking on Zukian's group to distract some of the cats and take the heat off them would benefit them. And so without hesitation, they sprinted towards Zukian and his crew, hoping to share the burden. But these shadow cats were all 4-star demons, far stronger than anything they had faced so far. And it was clear the other students were trying to offload some of the aggro onto them, and so they dipped out of there as fast as they could, doing the only thing their instincts told them to do. Even though they knew outrunning a shadow cat was nearly impossible, they had no choice but to try. But not long after, the other students from the rival school caught up with them, and since Zheng Hao clearly pissed off, he immediately demanded to know which school they belonged to be this inconsiderate for leading the danger straight to them. To which the kid just sneered and told Zheng Hao to F off, refusing to reveal anything that might help them track him down after the competition. But since they were all now in the same predicament, Zhu Qian gave them a fair warning, and that his group would try to escape first, and the others better not dare outrun them to the exit. Unfortunately for them, there was no exit up ahead, which left them no choice but to stand and fight. And since the demon cats were closing in fast, the students from Icefield University had no time to waste. But since Zukian needed time to charge his avalanche skill, Zheng Hao and Lu Liang stepped up to buy him that precious time. But before they could get started, Zheng Hao noticed that the students from the other school were still trying to escape, even though they were the ones who led the demon cats there in the first place, which only fueled Zheng Hao's anger. But with survival on the line, he and Lu Liang decided to go all out. With this, Lu Liang's snow elf finally revealed its trump card, the Ice Weapon Awakening. In a transformation that looked straight out from Digimon, the elf went from a cute pet to a godly-looking creature. And the fire elf was no different either, as it activated its fire giant skill, growing into a towering inferno. And together they welcomed the demon cats with open arms. But even with their newfound power, the sheer number of enemies began to overwhelm them. But just as things were looking grim, Doggo finished charging his avalanche skill. And in the confined space of the cave, the avalanche was devastating, its power amplified by the narrow walls. And so the skill wiped out the demon cats up ahead, their bodies crushed under the onslaught of snow and ice. And as if that wasn't enough, Zukian followed up with his fire vortex to ensure every last one was taken care of, melting away the snow and any lingering threats. And the victory came with an unexpected bonus, as Doggo leveled up to 3 stars after taking down such a massive horde of 4-star elites. But this just left Kang utterly shocked. He couldn't believe how fast the wolf was leveling up. It hadn't even been a day, and Doggo had already grown stronger. And so doubts began creeping into Kang's mind, wondering if this wolf was even normal. But as the ashes began to fade, another ominous sound of a meow echoed from deeper within the cave, and it didn't take long for them to realize that they had attracted the attention of the entire cat demon nest. But instead of rushing to attack, the creatures seemed to have a different plan in mind. And the student from the other school, who had been dealing with these freaks a bit longer, recognized the tactic immediately, and that these cats were preparing to unleash a high-frequency roar, a technique known to cause cave collapses through its powerful resonance. Unfortunately, there was little time to brace for impact. The demon cats let out a demonic roar that assaulted their ears and shook the entire cave, and the ground beneath Zukian began to crack, and before he knew it, the floor gave way. It all happened so quickly that Lu Liang, despite his best efforts, couldn't save Zukian in time, and so Zukian and Doggo plunged into a massive pit, falling into the unknown depths below, with no clue how far or where it would take them. In the previous chapter, 6 schools had gathered for the competition. And once everyone was present, the event began. All the students were teleported inside the first floor of the cave, where the trials would take place. Fortunately, Zukian quickly found a schoolmate, and with the help of his fire ghost, they made short work of the beasts they encountered. As they were searching for the way to the second floor, they stumbled upon Zheng Hao and Lu Liang, reuniting their team. But as they finally entered the second floor, a new problem emerged. A group of students from another school had managed to bring trouble with them. Demon cats were hot on their trail. Worse yet, these students tried to shift some of the aggro onto Zukian's group, leaving them no choice but to run as well. But when they hit a dead end, there was no option left but to stand and fight. And with their combined efforts, Zukian and his group managed to defeat the demon cats. But the commotion attracted the attention of the entire nest. In retaliation, the demon cats unleashed a high-frequency roar that assaulted their ears and shook the cave violently. The ground beneath Zukian cracked under the strain, and before anyone could react, the floor gave way. Zukian and his companions fell deep into the abyss below, with no idea what awaited them at the bottom. Now on to the next part. Zukian and Doggo had fallen into the depths of a pit, but fortunately, due to Zukian's strengthened body from ranking up and the deep water cushioning their fall. They emerged uninjured, but as Zukian looked up at the crack they had fallen through, the distance was so great that he could no longer see the opening clearly. And it seemed that only he and Doggo had ended up in this mysterious place, but at least his phone was still working. And so they made good use of the phone's light, using it to illuminate the only tunnel they could see. As they cautiously moved forward, it became clear that this place was the habitat of elite high-level flower beasts, and knowing they might not be able to handle such powerful enemies, Zukian and Doggo tread carefully. But what was even more intriguing was that the tunnel walls didn't look natural. The smooth, symmetrical lines made it seem more like a man-made structure. But with no other options, they ventured deeper into the tunnel. But they quickly retreated in terror at what they witnessed at the tunnel's end. But after catching their breath and realizing that whatever they saw wasn't chasing them, they had no choice but to go back. This time they shone their light on the source of their fear. What they found was a large stone statue resembling a flower general, and this sight was puzzling, as it was clearly a statue. Yet Zukian could feel a suffocating pressure emanating from it, as if it were more than just a mere sculpture. And he should be feeling that way, 'cause I have seen this kind of statues before, and what they could do, and this Zukian might just be reborn as a shadow monarch or something like that. But unlike the intimidating stone statue from you-know-who, the source of the suffocating pressure Zukian felt was actually coming from a much smaller grass beast hiding behind it. The creature seemed quite disturbed by the unexpected intrusion into its domain, regarding Zukian and Doggo warily as if they were unwelcome guests in its palace. Meanwhile, back where Luliang and the others were, Zheng Hao and Kang decided to use their fire clone ability to check on Zukian. But the audacity of the students from the other school knew no bounds, as they tried to suggest that what Zheng Hao and Kang were attempting was impossible, claiming that the pit was bottomless. This comment pushed Zheng Hao over the edge, so he grabbed the student by the collar and called him out, reminding him that this entire predicament was their fault, and so they didn't need any more sarcastic remarks from them. And if he doesn't shut up, he would be glad to be the one thrown into the pit next. And this terrified the other students, prompting it to immediately apologize and beg Zheng Hao not to follow through on his threat, explaining that the lowest level of the cave was where the habitat of the elite-level generals resided, and it was a dangerous place for anyone to be. Despite this, the student tried to reassure them that Zukian would likely be fine. If he was smart, he could find a safe place to hide and wait for the others to reach that level and regroup with him. Or he could even press the distress signal if the situation became too dire. But Zheng Hao quickly clarified to the student that he was overestimating Zukian's intelligence, as there was no way Zukian would do something as cautious as hiding or waiting for help. So the only option now was for them to go to the lowest level themselves and find him as fast as possible. And since this mess was entirely their fault, Zheng Hao made it clear that they were coming along for the ride, whether they liked it or not. And unfortunately, their fire clones proved ineffective, unable to make it to the deepest floor as they were easily taken out by the mutant beasts along the way. And with no other options left, Zheng Hao and the others knew they had to gather as many people as possible, find the entrance to the lowest level and go down to meet Zukian in person. Meanwhile, back where Zukian was, he had turned to look for an exit when a sudden noise from behind caught his attention. He quickly spun around, just in time to see an attack coming his way. Thankfully, his newly acquired mech gloves kicked in, protecting him from injury, and the source of the attack was none other than the grass beast from before. Despite its size compared to the statue, this creature was a 7-star elite, a fact that became all too clear when it began controlling the massive stone statues around them. It was obvious that this was not a fight Zukian and Doggo could win easily. Still, Zukian wasn't the type to back down without a fight. Knowing they were up against a formidable foe, he and Doggo braced for the worst, unleashing everything they had right from the start. They were prepared to go all out, hoping that their combined strength could at least buy them some time until help arrived, or with any luck, maybe even turn the tide in their favor. But this boss of a beast wasn't about to give them any head start, as it formed a mini-sun and directed its rays at them with terrifying speed. Fortunately, Zukian's shield absorbed most of the impact, while Doggo's ice mist cooled them off, minimizing the damage. Leading the flower boss to switch tactics, using its vines to attack from all sides. This, however, was exactly what Zukian and Doggo had been hoping for. Seizing the opportunity, they unleashed their fire vortex skill, and since flames are super effective against grass, they dealt significant damage to the boss. And seeing the flower boss recoil in fright gave them a boost of confidence. Not wanting to give it any chance to recover or use the giant statues to attack, Zukian activated the flame vortex again, determined to finish the fight in one decisive blow. But the flower boss had other plans. as it concentrated natural energy into its hand and slammed it into the ground, activating a savage growth that sprouted massive vines to block the flames. It even went so far as to use a large amount of energy to suck the flames away, preventing them from spreading further. But this move just puzzled Zukian, as the vines weren't part of the flower boss's main body. So why would it waste so much energy to eliminate the flames when it could have simply backed away to create distance? Unless it wasn't able to retreat because it was trying to protect something. And the only thing behind the flower boss was that giant statue. And this realization sparked a new plan in Zukian's mind. It seemed like the statue was important to the boss. So without hesitation, they shifted their strategy, directing all their attacks toward the statue to see if Zukian's hunch was correct. And so Doggo zoomed in like a maniac straight toward the statue. And just as Zukian suspected, the grass boss threw itself between Doggo and the statue, taking the hit directly. And this completely confirmed Zukian's assumption. The statue was indeed the key and not one it can control. With this, they realized they had a winning chance, so they pressed the advantage, focusing all their attacks on the statue. And as expected, the grass boss desperately tried to shield it, which was exactly what Zukian and Doggo wanted. And so they doubled down, unleashing a combination of flame vortex and ice mist to prevent the boss from blocking their attacks. But just when they thought they had the upper hand, the boss did something completely unpredictable, as it decided to blow itself up. And the self-destruction was so powerful that it neutralized their attacks, ensuring that none of them could reach the statue. But this did signify that they have defeated it, causing Doggo to rank up to a 4-star elite, which also evolved his Ice Claw into Soul Claw, allowing it to materialize wolf claws made of pure soul energy that coordinated perfectly with his attacks. And normally this would have made Zukian ecstatic, but his mind was too preoccupied with what the flower boss had just done. Sacrificing itself just to protect a statue seemed like a foolish move, but in this cave nothing was simple or easy. The self-destruct suggested that the battle might only be beginning, but despite his unease, there were no further movements in the cave. The flower boss lay dead before him, and everything was eerily quiet. It seemed, at least for the moment, that the battle was indeed over. But Zukian couldn't shake the feeling that whatever they had stumbled upon was more significant than they realized, and that the real challenge might still lie ahead. And so Zukian cautiously approached the fallen flower boss and collected its crystals. The crystals were indeed darker than any he had seen before, a clear sign that this was the boss, and that he had just obtained the highest quality crystals available in this area. But the question still lingered in his mind. Why did the Flower General go to such lengths to protect that statue, even sacrificing its own life? If these statues were truly that important to the Flower Generals, then it might actually save him a lot of time hunting them down, as they would likely come to him drawn to defend these statues. But as he stood there waiting, he couldn't shake the curiosity gnawing at him. What exactly made these statues so important? Could they be the key to the abnormalities that the system had tasked him with investigating? Perhaps the answers he sought lay within these mysterious statues. But before he could delve deeper into his thoughts, another Flower General appeared. But this time, knowing their weakness, Zuchen felt more confident than ever. Armed with the knowledge that the statues were their Achilles' heel, and with Doggo's newly enhanced abilities, he was more than ready to face this new threat. Meanwhile, back with the other groups, they were doing their best to push forward, killing every monster they encountered as quickly as possible. They were increasingly concerned that the longer they took, the greater the chances were that Zukian might be found by a Flower General. But the students from the other school who didn't know Zukian at all were beginning to lose their nerve. They started suggesting that they should give up the search, fearing that if they went any deeper, they might not be able to get out. And they speculated that Zukian had probably pressed the SOS button and had already left the cave. But Zheng Hao just immediately shot down their assumptions, making it clear that what they were thinking was impossible, as Zukian was not the type of person to back down, no matter how tough the situation. That's also why he had once fought off 3 elite beasts when he was just at the ordinary rank, and was also the one who broke 2 of Zuo Weikshui's records in the training palace. And if that wasn't enough to convince them, Kang jumped in to brag about how Zukian's beast had entered the cave as a 1-star elite, but thanks to the powerful enemies he had defeated, including the demon cats that the other students had unwittingly led to them, his wolf had already ranked up to 3 stars in an instant. But even with these, the guy from the other school still tried to convince the group to retreat, arguing that it was too risky to continue. But the rest of their team were resolute, and they didn't care none about the other kids' feelings, as their focus was on finding Zukian no matter the risks. They knew he would never give up, and neither would they. The only option was to press on, doing whatever it took to reach him before it was too late. Meanwhile, Zuchen's battle with the Flower Generals was growing fiercer by the minute. But with their tactics in place, they managed to break through their enemy's defenses, and Doggo's newly upgraded soul claws made him look more of a boss than the flower generals themselves, as his claws were so strong that they could easily crumble any rock they touched, which the flower general noticed immediately. So they desperately tried to shield the statue with its own body. But Doggo's attack was so powerful that it managed to inflict damage on the statue despite the general's efforts. But this just sent the flower general into a berserk state, which Zukian and Doggo quickly realized they had made a critical mistake, as the general began to gather a massive amount of energy, clearly preparing to self-destruct in a last-ditch effort to take them down with it. And the energy buildup was so intense that when the general finally exploded, the impact was so devastating that Zukian and Doggo were thrown off their feet like ragdolls, while the entire cave shook violently. And the shockwave was so powerful that Zheng Hao and the others still some distance away felt the tremors, and the student from the other school who were already on edge was now even more terrified. So he tried once again to convince the group to retreat, insisting that continuing any further was madness. But Zheng Hao had enough of his bitchery, and so he forced him to go in front, making it clear that they were not backing down. Meanwhile, back where Zukian was, he quickly realized that even the slightest touch on the statue could drive the flower generals into a berserk frenzy. So, he made a mental note to be more careful in the future. No more accidental statue damage. They would need to up their game, trying their best to feign attacks without actually touching the statues. And for a moment, Zukian and Doggo breathed a sigh of relief. Both of them were okay, and they even managed to snag another high-grade crystal as a bonus. He just hopes that the commotion they had caused wouldn't attract more flower generals, as they could only handle fighting one at a time at best. But as if his loud thoughts had somehow jinxed them, more flower generals appeared on cue, and they were more aggressive and determined than ever before, which caught them by surprise. But with no choice but to press forward, they prepared for the onslaught. But Zukian knew he had to adapt his strategy quickly. He might be an idiot in some respects, but when it came to battle, his IQ was off the charts. So as the tentacle-whipping generals attacked together, Zukian seized the moment and activated the ice mist, turning the battlefield into a chaotic mess, which allowed him and Doggo to slip away from the generals and appear right on top of the statue. And knowing how much these creatures despised outsiders tarnishing their precious statues, Zukian deliberately baited them into attacking him. And as expected, the flower generals furiously launched their attacks, but Zukian quickly hid behind the statue. And the plan worked perfectly, as the generals were desperate to avoid damaging the statue, and therefore found themselves in an awkward defenseless state. And Zukian didn't hesitate to take advantage of this, swiftly eliminating them one by one. And with Doggo's passive speed absorption, he instantly rose to a 5-star elite, which greatly delighted Zukian. Meanwhile, the others felt the cave shake even more violently, causing the skeptical student to doubt that this could possibly be the work of the Zukian that Zheng Hao and the others spoke of so highly, prompting him to question them, hoping that maybe he was right and this wasn't Zukian's doing. But the three fell silent, knowing all too well that this was exactly the kind of chaos Zukian would create. And as they had feared, Zukian was indeed causing havoc, casually creating multiple mini-suns inside the cave, unaware of the massive explosions and the violent tremors they were triggering. And the vibrations were so intense that even the students on the first floor could feel them, leading to widespread confusion. Many students were baffled about who could possibly be responsible for such destruction. Meanwhile, Teacher Zhao remained stoic, determined to keep the truth under wraps, as he knew it had to be Zukian. No other student possessed such destructive power, and causing trouble was practically this boy's specialty. And he was indeed right on the mark. The explosions Zukian created were attracting more and more flower generals. And if it weren't for his protective gloves and the strategies he had developed to restrain these beasts, he and Doggo might not have survived such relentless attacks. But against all odds, they managed to do the impossible. With this, Doggo was able to reach 6 stars, which not only increased Doggo's soul limit, but also restored all the soul power he had expended. This rejuvenation was what had allowed them to hold on for so long. Finally, after what felt like an endless battle, the appearance of flower generals ceased, so it became clear that they had cleared out all the mutant beasts in the area, and the violent vibrations of the cave stopped. And with this moment of peace, Zukian decided it was time to pack up and collect all the crystals from the beasts they had defeated. To his amazement, the sheer number of crystals scattered across the land was staggering. He couldn't even help but wish he had brought a few more bags to carry them all. It was clear that their hard-fought battle had been well worth it.